Joe Biden delivers remarks about preventing the debt ceiling default, and we'll be talking about that. We'll actually listen to, I think, the majority of the remarks. I think it's only a 4-minute clip, but we'll be listening to what that says, what he's got to say, and what's happening now as we get closer and closer to the debt ceiling. So we'll go over a lot of that at the top of the show. But in other news, a university researcher felt threatened by an aide to Schiff over information that was originally in the Durham report and also in the Steele dossier and a number of other things. So we'll be talking a bit more about what's going on with that story and some of the fallout from that. The Nashville Covenant School has now filed a motion to block the release of the manifesto, which is an interesting turn of events. So we'll talk about some of the lead up to that and what's happening with that and where that goes. And Latino truckers, whether legal or illegal, are planning to boycott Florida. A video shows we will not be going. We'll be talking about this and a number of other things that are happening with the Florida Governor Ron DeSantis. It is going to be all of this and more over here on Contemporary. I was the one flying the balloons. I am Jay Edgar, and this is Contemporary. Good evening, world. Welcome to Contemporary. My name is Jay Edgar, and we've got a bunch of stuff to go over on the stack tonight for your evening news. So we're going to be going over all that. We'll be talking debt ceiling. We'll be talking about Florida. We'll be talking about the Durham report and a bunch more stuff here over here on Contemporary. It's going to be a great time. So if you're liking what you're seeing here, and if you're on the Instagram side, by the way, do go over and check out the link in the description. That is the only way that you can see the full show and not just the preview of what's going on here. I know that there was the big request, which I don't know if that was real person or bot, looking at, hey, accept me, bring me in. And I mean, I'm used to getting that off the Instagram side of people who are just in there. It's usually after you get a big follow, after you make a comment on a big account, where you're suddenly getting a bunch of people coming in here and screaming, hey, let's get into the live, let me into your live stream here. But we've got a bunch to go over here today over on Contemporary. So before we get started, make sure you guys go check out great programming, such as The Daily Ignoramus, The Breakdown with Birkenhoff, The R-Rated Conservative, The Porch Boys. Go check out Tweets by Brit if you're more into culture in a short-form Twitter format. Mr. Behavior if you're more into the video game side. The No Gimmicks podcast if audio only is your thing. Or go check out Silent Caster. More video game news and more of a more libertarian perspective. Or if you just want something a bit more lighthearted, go check out Clown World Chronicles on some of the off platforms. I know he's not on YouTube himself, but go check out all that great programming. It is going to be a great time, and let us bring you the news from the common man for the common man. That's right, stop getting your news from people who wear suits that cost more than your house. Get your news from people who are just like you, and let's get started. And we're going to start. Oh, that's me. Look at that. Let's get started with the finance as we always do here. Let me get the live chats up here so I can see what you guys are doing on all of our platforms. Hey, look, that's me again. Bunch of people over on Rumble too, by the way. I like the fact that Rumble is starting to grow too. And if you do feel like you want to come back in and chat, if you are in either the Instagram side, the YouTube side, DLive, Twitch, or Rumble, you can go check out all of those links and chat in and chime in on the conversation. I do check your chats as you go, and let's get started. Down with the Dow, which spent the day up today in a surprising turn of events. The Dow was at 33 at 420.77. That is up 408.63 points, or 1.25% on the day. It had a little bit of a rocky start coming off the top, and it looked like it actually was going to sink down coming at the beginning of the day, but climbing its way back up as it went to that 408-point jump on the Dow. And this is because a lot of investors right now are thinking that there's no way that they're going to let anything fall in default. They're going to come through in the clutch. I hate to say it, I think they're right, so we'll be talking a bit about that a little bit later on in the program. Your Bitcoin also taking a significant rise today, $292 and 52 cents up rather. That's 1.08% up on the day to $27,330 and 10 cents on the day. So your Bitcoin is becoming slightly more worthwhile as we look through and follow this as it goes. Gas prices, Madison area, are the same. Hopefully your gas prices are staying the same as well. But with Memorial Day coming up, we may see some spikes coming up here in the very near future, so we'll be seeing what happens with that. And let's look in at your finance for the day. CNBC stocks close higher Wednesday. Dow surges 400 points as traders grow optimistic on a debt ceiling deal. From Sarah Min and Alex Herring. You know, I'd hate to be an investor in this environment because there's an expectation, if you're investing, if you are being an investor in this environment, that if things start to go just a little bit way in the Biden direction, that you're supposed to come in and jump in and buy, no matter how much we're closing in on a recession, no matter where the finance is going, you are expected to go back in and buy if you want to be a good little investor in the New York Stock Exchange. And I hate that sentiment. Stocks rose Wednesday as investors hoped congressional leaders and President Biden could come to a deal on the U.S. debt ceiling and avoid a catastrophic default. The Dow traded 408.63 points higher, or 1.24%, to 33,420.77. The S&P gained 1.19 to 41.77. The Nasdaq advanced 1.28 to 12,557. At the conclusion of a meeting between the president and congressional leaders Tuesday, Kevin McCarthy said that a better process is now in place for further talks, saying it's possible to get a deal by the end of the week. The White House said that Biden canceled the second leg of an upcoming international trip to focus on the negotiations. Now we have a structure to find a way to come to a conclusion, McCarthy said on CNBC's Squawk Box on Wednesday. I think at the end of the day, we do not have a debt default. I think we finally get the president to agree to negotiate. Well, and see, that's a part of the problem, too, is that he is going to agree to negotiate, but we saw yesterday there are people getting arrested for protesting against negotiation, which is an interesting position to be in, and we'll be talking about that with the debt ceiling as well. On Wednesday morning, Biden said from the White House that he and other lawmakers had a productive meeting. I'm confident that we'll get the agreement on the budget and that America will not default, man, Biden said. Concerns over a potential default have weighed on markets recently. The Dow was down about 2% this month, including a 1% decline on Tuesday. Sam Stovall, chief investment strategist at CFRA Research, said he expects that markets are stuck in neutral. Even as the news becomes more and more optimistic on the debt ceiling, he cited recent trends in the 10-year yield as well as strength indicators in the S&P 500. So we will see what happens on your finance, which is going to revolve on our top story of the day. Let's look at our layoffs report, and this is not necessarily of what happens with the layoffs. This is more of a what is happening after the layoffs, because surprise, surprise, I guess we can't go without all those jobs after all. At least at some of our big tech platforms here. Google, Meta, Amazon hire low-paid foreign workers after U.S. layoffs. From Ariel Zilber. Some of the biggest companies in tech, including Google, Meta, Amazon, Microsoft, and Salesforce, have hired foreign workers just weeks after reducing headcounts by thousands of employees, according to a report. Google, which laid off some 12,000 employees earlier this year, filed applications for low-paid foreign workers to come to the U.S. and assume highly specialized tech roles within the company, according to investigative journalist Li Fang. The Alphabet-owned search engine submitted applications for dozens of foreign workers who were seeking to fill roles including software engineers, analytical consultants, user experience researchers, and others. Fang wrote in a Substack newsletter on Tuesday. The Google-owned self-driving outfit Waymo has received government approval for H-1B visa applications for engineering jobs, according to Fang. I love this, by the way. Do you know why I love this? There are 3 words that I don't know if I can still say on YouTube that were being flung at janitors, factory workers, and a whole slew of Made in America jobs back under the Obama administration. It was LTC were the initials, and the journalists and the tech people, the smug liberals, were telling all these unioneers, the factory workers, and the people, hey, your job isn't coming back. Learn to... I can't say that last word on YouTube, I don't think. I still don't think I can say that. Because you might be making fun of journalists. I still remember when Twitter and YouTube banned those words, those 3 words. Based on the fact that the factory workers, when the journalists started getting laid off, started turning their back at them, and all of a sudden, now that was harassment. That was a big problem. So, the reason that I love this, by the way, was the insistence is that these jobs either had to go overseas, these jobs had to go away, and they were never going to come back. Barack Obama said that in a speech. Oh, the jobs, they're gone. We do better than this in America now. That's just it. That's all we do. We do better. If you don't like it, let it do. Still don't know if I can say that on YouTube. Well, a lot of these people learned how to program a computer, and now their jobs are gone. I hope, and I don't think that's going to be the case, unfortunately. I'm sure that the people who were being smug about this on social media at the time were from families who have protected connections in there, and their jobs aren't going to go away. But I do hope that at least a number of people... I will speak ill of these people, by the way, too. I hope to God that a number of these people who said those 3 words to the factory workers who were losing their jobs to foreign workers, I hope at least a plurality of them were on the layoffs list. I do. Because that would be karma. Now, of course, there's no such thing as karma, and I mean, there's even no such thing as retribution. There's no such thing as justice, but I'm going to tell you right off the bat, that would still be hilarious to me. So, get woke, go broke, and then once you start going broke, hire out foreign workers. It's the circle of life. Alright, let's talk debt ceiling. And the first thing we're going to do, this is a 5-minute clip. We're going to listen to, I think, the majority of it. 2.5 minutes is usually what we average videos on this channel, so we'll probably listen to the majority of the 5-minute clip here. President Biden delivering remarks on preventing the first ever government default. Now, because of my work schedule, I have not followed up on this, but there have been some rumors, and there's some stuff in the comments in this particular video suggesting the fact, and I've not been able to follow up on this if this is true, if somebody in the live chat knows the answer to this and wants to go back and fact check me on this. They're saying now that this is actually not the first debt default. In fact, this would be the 5th if we go into a debt default, which it does not appear that we're going to do. Somebody fact check me on that while we listen to the Houseplant-in-Chief deliver his remarks.
Leaders of G7. America's role in the world is vital, especially right now, as we work together with other countries to support Ukraine and take on the challenges that demand international cooperation. and from tackling the climate crisis to strengthening the global economy. And before I leave, I wanted to say a word about the status of negotiations with the congressional leaders. We had a productive meeting yesterday, and with all 4 leaders in the Congress. It was civil and respectful, and everyone came to the meeting, I think, in good faith. I'm confident that we'll get the agreement on the budget, that America will not default. And every leader in the room understands the consequences if we fail to pay our bills. And it would be catastrophic for the American economy and the American people if we didn't pay our bills. And I'm confident everyone in the room agreed with the speaker, from the speaker to the majority leader, to the majority leader in the House and the Senate, the majority in the Senate.
Okay, first off, I have this cranked up on volume, and this guy's just, and second off, man, I would hate to be the lady on the side, the sign language interpreter, listening to this, trying to figure out what it is that he's going to say before and after he says it. Especially trying to figure out what he said after the fact. That has got to be like the worst job in the U.S. government. Joe Biden's sign language interpreter.
Senate, the minority leader in the Senate, as well as the Democratic leader in the House, that we're going to come together because there's no alternative to do the right thing for the country. We have to move on. And to be clear, this negotiation is about the outlines of what the budget will look like, not about whether or not we're going to, in fact, pay our debts. The leaders have all agreed we will not default. Every leader has said that. And I'm proud of the progress my administration has made. We've reduced the deficit in the first 2 years by $1.7 trillion in the first 2 years. And I proposed a budget that would reduce another $3 trillion over the next decade. That includes more revenue by asking the wealthy and large corporations to begin to pay their fair share. And
there's that buzz term again, their fair share. What is the fair share? Again, nobody will ever give me a number. They just say their fair share. Fair share, fair share.
Cutting subsidies that exist in the law now to big oil and big pharma. Yesterday, we all agreed that both the Speaker McCarthy and I would designate senior members that we would negotiate to give our authority to make agreements in detail what we wanted. So we narrowed the group. To meet and hammer out our differences. And we've done that. In fact, they met last night, and they're going to be meeting again today. And I'll be in constant contact with my team while I'm at the G7, and I'll be in close touch with Speaker McCarthy and other leaders as well. Now, what I have done, in anticipation that we won't get it all done till I get back, is I've cut my trip short in order to be for the final negotiations and sign the deal with the majority leader.
Did you cut your trip short because you have to be back here for this, or did you cut your trip short because you've clearly got the Rona, dude? Listen to this guy.
I made clear that, and I'll say it again, America is not a deadbeat nation. We pay our bills. The nation has never defaulted on its debt, and it never will.
Lie.
And we're going to continue these discussions with congressional leaders in the coming days until we reach an agreement, and I'll have more to say about that on Sunday when I have a press conference on this issue. As it stands now, the intention is...
I wonder if all the handlers are getting out there scrambling, trying to walk back the press conference promise yet. They don't like it when he goes out and does press conferences.
To go to the G7, be back here on Sunday, hold a press conference, and in the meantime, I've spoken to the Australian leader Albanese. I'm going to be seeing him.
Hold on.
Hold a press conference, and in the meantime, I've spoken to the Australian.
He starts to stutter, and then just look at the look on her face. Like, are you? She is, excuse my language, I'm sorry, Mom, if my nieces are listening right now. Do earmuffs, please. Because just look at the look on her face. She has got that, what the fuck did you put me through look on her face. Everybody sees that, right? I can full screen this. Look at that look as he just, and it's just that couple seconds delay after he starts to stutter and stammer. I had dreams, you know. I was going to be interpreter to the stars. I was going to be important. Now I don't know how to sign. That poor woman.
Australian leader Albanese, and I'm going to be seeing him at the G7. He'll be there as well, along with the Indian Prime Minister and along with the Japanese as well. So the Quad members will be there. We'll get a chance to talk separately at the meeting, but it's unlikely I'm going to be going on to Australia. So thank you very much.
Mr. President, what about work requirements specifically are you still considering? It sounds like it's still on the table and you haven't ruled it out. Which would you be willing to accept?
Well, I'm not going to accept any work requirements that's going to impact on medical health needs of people. I'm not going to accept any work requirements that go much beyond what is already.
And which is also a lie, by the way. Because the work requirements have nothing to do with the infirmed. The only people who are... It's only able-bodied adults without kids. I mean, all you got to do if you want to get on those sweet, sweet government bennies is go out and pop out a kid. And that's the Republican plan, by the way.
Well, I voted years ago for the work requirements that exist. But it's possible there could be a few others, but not anything of any consequence. Thank you.
What message does this send to PNG and Australia? I know that it was important to you to focus on Asia in this trip, but this is having to be put aside. Is this almost a win for China?
No, because we're still meeting. We still have 4 good allies.
Will you be announcing new sanctions on Russia during the G7?
With President Xi soon, sir?
Whether it's soon or not, we will be meeting.
You will be meeting or you will be speaking?
He's not going to answer that. I won't be doing it soon enough, man. Wow, that was painful. Now, I did not listen to that previously. I'd seen some of the closed caption from this. I had not listened to this previously. And again, the big side of this is this man has spent the last 3 weeks telling the entire world that the Republicans that want to go back out and have some spending cuts that come with this are domestic terrorists, that are economic terrorists, that they want to destroy. They want to default on the debt to destroy your life, and Biden is the only person that's standing in their way. I don't give Mitch McConnell anything because I know that he is a part of that uniparty, but I give Kevin McCarthy a load of credit for actually going in and attending these meetings. If I was Speaker of the House, maybe I wouldn't if I was Speaker just because of the awesome responsibility that comes with that office, but I really think if I was Speaker of the House, I would at least consider telling Biden to go and get bent. Oh, fine, I'm an economic terrorist, then don't negotiate with terrorists. I would make him own those remarks. I would. All right, let's read from CBS News. From Catherine Watson's debt ceiling demands and red lines for the White House and Republicans. As negotiating teams for President Biden and House Speaker McCarthy work on hammering out a deal to raise or suspend the debt ceiling with under 2 weeks until a possible U.S. default, each side has demands and so-called red lines that have been drawn. Democrats want a clean legislation, a debt ceiling increase without conditions. They reason that negotiations on spending in the budget can be undertaken after the debt ceiling is resolved. Basically, again, after they can go tell Republicans to go and fuck themselves. What possible incentive do we have? We're not worried about the debt ceiling right now. No, you take your little spending cuts and get them off my table. That's what's going to happen. That's why, of course, they want that debt ceiling done without negotiations. That's not a solution Republicans like much. Republicans are holding out for spending cuts and other provisions. Here are some of them and how they're being received. Work requirements for entitlements. Republicans want to see work requirements added and tightened for able-bodied adults who apply for entitlements and benefits, including temporary assistance for needy families, the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, and Medicaid. The across-the-board work requirements would apply to those who do not have dependents. House Speaker McCarthy said Tuesday that this is a red line for him. TANF, formerly known as food stamps, already have some work requirements, as does SNAP. Currently, childless able-bodied adults 18 to 49 are required to work for 20 hours a week or enroll in a work training program to be eligible for SNAP benefits. Republicans want to add work requirements for Medicaid too and toughen existing work requirements. I'm a little bit on the fence about that based on the fact that typically, not always, but typically, if you're on Medicaid at a young age, you are not able-bodied. Typically. Again, that is not always the case, but typically you're in that situation because there's something going on there. Mr. Biden said Tuesday didn't rule out the possibility of additional work requirements, but he rejected work requirements that could negatively affect Americans' health outcomes. I'm not going to accept any work requirements that's going to impact on medical health needs of people. Much beyond what's already in place. Spending cuts or caps. Republicans are also adamant that spending caps or spending cuts need to be a part of any agreement. They're unlikely to make a deal without them. The debt ceiling bill House Republicans recently passed along party lines contains their proposed cuts. McCarthy wants to cap future spending and grow federal spending by just 1% each year. The White House isn't willing to come close to the spending constraints that the House passed bill, but they are likely to make some concessions here. Still, many Democrats won't like it, and they will reject it in the Senate too, by the way. There will be a huge backlash if we do something like institute work requirements or cut spending more broadly. Pramila Jayapal, a progressive from Washington, told CBS News. All of these things disproportionately affect poor people, people in rural areas, Black, brown, and indigenous folks. Those are people who are going to feel the burden of spending cuts of work requirements. That's not in line with their democratic values at a time when hunger is at a very high rate across the country. Because food is outrageous. Because inflation is outrageous. Recoup appropriated but unspent pandemic money. Republicans also want to claw back funds appropriated for the pinko pox but have not yet been spent, pointing out that even the admin has declared the pandemic emergency is over. Congress has passed 6 large spending bills to manage the fallout from the pandemic, totaling $4.6 trillion. That is about $4.6 trillion too many. By January, about $4.2 trillion had already been spent, according to the Government Accountability Office, leaving billions unspent. The president said of the funding last week that, we don't need it all, although he added he still needs to take a hard look to assess what obligations remain. Still, it's on the table. Reforming and streamlining federal infrastructure permitting rules is another item in the GOP's list of demands. It's an area of possible compromise the White House hasn't publicly shot down, because they're not talking about that. They're talking about, hey, they want to go after poor people, man. Making cuts to the climate legislation. Republicans want to tie any debt ceiling increase to cuts to clean energy incentives in the Inflation Production Act. Those incentives include things like credits for energy-efficient HVAC system installations. Slashing those incentives is not something the White House wants to do, but it remains to be seen whether there's room for compromise, especially given the fact that that would bring in some revenue back by eliminating tax credits for people who are usually wealthy when they go out and buy these things. You would think Democrats would be all over that. Tax cuts for the wealthy! Well, that's a tax cut for the wealthy. The non-wealthy are living in places that already have HVAC units in them. What other options are there? Last week, Mr. Biden said he's considering invoking the 14th to circumvent Congress and raise the debt ceiling unilaterally. That is a dangerous game. You do not want to go down. But he also appears to express doubt about the practicality of such a move, saying it would have to be litigated. In the meantime, without an extension of the debt ceiling, it would still cause financial instability. 5 Senate Democrats are nonetheless circulating a letter urging the president to invoke the 14th. And then, of course, the economy hostage thing. This, by the way, and again, this is where I'm so impressed by McCarthy actually coming to the table. If I found out from CBS that there was a letter like this talking about my party, again, I would tell the administration, hey, you say you don't negotiate with terrorists, well, go and F yourself. Don't negotiate with terrorists then. I guess I'm a terrorist. Republicans have made it clear that they're prepared to hold our entire economy hostage unless you accede to their demands to reduce the deficit in the backs of working families. That is simply unacceptable, the letter reads. So, and the protesters are out there making sure that it's just a debt ceiling increase and nothing else. On the private sector side, from the Daily Wire, major bank sets up war room as nation approaches debt default. From Ben Ziesloft. Veteran bank executives are meeting with senior lawmakers and federal officials as the government comes within 2 weeks of a potential debt default. The debt ceiling, a statute established by Congress that prevents the government from spending beyond a predetermined debt limit of $31.4 trillion, exceeded the threshold earlier this year. Yellen said in a letter the agency expects to default on obligations as early as the first day of June, unless the debt limit is amended. Chuck U. Schumer hosted a meeting with JP Morgan Chase CEO Jamie Dimon and Citigroup CEO Jane Fraser on Wednesday morning, according to a report from Bloomberg. Dimon informed the outlet that his financial institution created a war room that will monitor contingencies should lawmakers fail to make a deal to increase the debt limit. I asked them to make sure that they tell everybody the default should not be an option, Schumer told journalists after the meeting with Dimon and Fraser, according to a report from CNN. An unnamed source told the outlet that the conversation between Schumer and the executives was frank, noting that lawmaker prompted them to ask every member of Congress to explicitly commit themselves to avoid a default. Man, that is... I mean, if that right there wasn't coming from a Democrat, you wouldn't be hearing about this from The Wire. You would be hearing every major news outlet, if this was a Republican saying that, calling that an anti-Semitic remark. And because we're on YouTube, I'm not going to go over why that would be taken as an anti-Semitic remark, but I think most of you guys get that. So, that is where we are at for that. Also, Yellen is to meet with Dimon and other bank CEOs tomorrow as the crisis looms. From Matt Egan. With time running out to reach a deal on the debt ceiling, Yellen plans to meet with bank CEOs on Thursday in Washington, sources tell CNN. Unnamed, of course. Jamie Dimon and Jane Fraser plan to attend the Yellen meeting, which will very likely include a focus on the debt ceiling as well as the banking crisis. People familiar with the matter told CNN. Unnamed again, Bank of America confirmed to CNN that its CEO, Brian Moynihan, also plans to attend. The huddle with bank executives is part of an annual meeting held by the Bank Policy Institute, a financial trade group that represents dozens of banks, including Goldman Sachs, Wells Fargo, and Citigroup. The Treasury Department previously confirmed that Yellen plans to meet this week with the Bank Policy Institute's Board of Directors, which is chaired by Dimon and includes CEOs of BNY Mellon, Citigroup, and Truist. Dimon had been outspoken on the debt ceiling, warning last week in a Bloomberg interview that a default would be potentially catastrophic and risk setting off a panic in financial markets. So, the panic is coming. And they want you to be panicked over something that really honestly shouldn't affect you, but here we are. On some of the pushback, again, something I'm impressed by McCarthy, but I know it's not going to go anywhere. Even he can brand this as much as he wants, but Biden's got a captive media. So I don't know if this is going to work or if this would even go without backfiring. But reading from Fox News, McCarthy rebrands looming debt ceiling breach, Biden default, from Elizabeth L. Kind. House Speaker McCarthy is setting up to pin a looming possible financial crisis on President Biden. The Republican leader indicated on Wednesday, declaring that it would be the Biden default if an agreement is not reached in time on raising the debt limit. Our debt is larger than our economy by more than 20% if we do nothing. We will pay more interest in the next 10 years than we paid in the last 83. The speaker said at a press conference, if we do nothing and you follow along, God forbid you get a Biden default, because he ignores the problem just as he ignored the border. That is a fair point coming from McCarthy, by the way, because we have been talking about this since the second week of January. We've been going over this for that long, and they're just now, this is May. We're in the second week of May. And we are just now talking about this. McCarthy made an unannounced appearance at the press event, which featured more than 24 Republican lawmakers across the House and Senate, touting Democrats' apparent concessions to negotiate on the debt ceiling after insisting on a clean increase of the borrowing limit for months. Biden had his second meeting on the debt limit with McCarthy and other congressional leaders on Tuesday, just before jetting off to Japan for a G7 summit. Talks have so far resulted in little movement, with Democrats maintaining their position and Republicans demanding spending cuts drawn out in their Limit, Save, Grow Act be paired with any increase of the debt ceiling. Now let's be realistic about this. As much as the media is going to try to tell you that this is the Biden default, or this is the McCarthy default, and it's Republicans holding the economy hostage. When you look at this realistically, McCarthy came out from the beginning, all the way back in January, and said, I am willing to give you a debt ceiling increase. Even though my party is not, I am willing to give you a debt ceiling increase, but you have to give me something in return. And Biden, from the beginning, said, I'm not going to give you crap, man. Just give me the clean debt ceiling. Suspend my debt ceiling, man. Let me spend as much money as I want. Ukraine needs us, man. So, no matter how the media tries to spin this, and they have been trying to spin this, again, as the Republicans holding the economy hostage. But no matter what the spin is on this, this is the Biden default if this does happen. And I do think that there is maybe some panic setting in that they can't lie their way out of this. That the Biden default actually might hold. I mean, no matter what, the page shills and the people who follow the page shills on Twitter are always going to call this a McCarthy default, but, that's a captive audience. They're not going to vote for somebody else. It's the independents who have to look at this. And Biden was supposed to be, and he never has been. He's been trying to play the blame game since the beginning. But his campaign promise was, I'm the buck stops here, President, man. My opponent blames everybody for everything, and I'm going to be your buck stops here. Come on, man. And both sides are even getting to do this. GOP and Democrats ready blame game for debt ceiling failure. From Emily Brooks and Mike Lillis. As debt limit talks drag on behind closed doors, lawmakers on both sides are preparing for Washington's favorite pastime, the partisan blame game if everything falls apart. Speaker McCarthy has accused President Brandon and Democrats of not taking the negotiations seriously, flaunting that Republicans have already passed a bill that paired the debt limit increase with spending cuts and calling for a deal by the end of the week. The House is the only body that has passed a bill to raise the debt limit, McCarthy said on Tuesday after the meeting with Biden and the White House. Democrats have rejected that argument, accusing Republicans of holding the economy hostage in their refusal to pass a standalone debt ceiling hike to avoid a default and put the talks over the deficit reduction on a separate track. What'll be interesting about this, by the way, and I'm a little bit wary for the investors who think that what's happening right now means that it's all over and we can go start investing and we don't have to worry about the default. I'm a little bit wary for those people because, you know, the entire news media has made this about McCarthy and Biden and those two having to negotiate back and forth. It doesn't take very many Democrats at all to go back and tank this. So not necessarily Schumer, who would probably have a private conversation with his party if they did tank this. But they could very, very easily come back around and tank this out of the Senate and it never even make it to the president's desk. That is still a possibility. So we will see what happens there. We have an op-ed from Christine Romans over at CNN. The opinions expressed in this article, even though they called this an analysis, and I've griped about this before, but this is an op-ed. I've read this already. But the op-ed, the opinions expressed in the article are the opinions of Christine Romans and not necessarily the opinions of CNN, Turns of Pages Productions, Contemporary, or your host, Jay Edgar. CNN writes, Christine Romans writes, debt ceiling threat, time to take this political football off the field. Alarm and frustration grow by the day over the debt ceiling stalemate gripping Washington. On the line, American living standards, family budgets, and stability in the global financial system. In theory, the debt ceiling should act as a fiscal restraint during the budgeting process. But after near meltdowns in 11, 13, and again today, many argue it's time to take the political football off the field. The time for tax and spending choices by Congress is through the normal course of business. Deciding later to not pay the bills by not raising the debt ceiling is not sound fiscal policy. Do you guys understand how insane you sound when you keep doing that thing? This is not about, it's not about new spending, it's about paying the bills. Dude, a lot of Americans are going through this right now, unfortunately, where they have to do so. But it is not a good idea if you can't afford to keep your lights on and buy groceries and make the payments on the credit cards that you already have, you know, paying your bills, as they're saying here, by taking out another line of credit. That is not good fiscal policy, and yet that seems to be the direction that our Congress wants to go. If you're in that point where, yes, you do already have your credit card maxed out and you're struggling to buy groceries and keep your lights on, you go through and you turn the thermostat down or up, depending on what time of year it is, a couple degrees, and you turn more lights off. Maybe use a candle if you can get some for cheap enough to get some light and some heat throughout your house. And you buy the generic mac and cheese and not the regular mac and cheese. You cut your spending. Janet Yellen, a Democrat, has testified to Congress that she would like it gone. Of course she would. Jerome Powell, a Republican, has said the debt ceiling is counterproductive. He's not really a Republican, he's a neo-partyist. And the CEO of the nation's biggest bank, JP Morgan Chase's Jamie Dimon, turns visibly frustrated at the subject of the debt ceiling, he reiterated last week to Bloomberg, "I would love to get rid of the debt ceiling." Yeah, because you can buy up any assets of the overspending, as you proved with SVB. And this is your standard fare CNN, which is supposedly so Republican, telling you to give in to the Democrats' wish list and let them spend unimpeded. So there's your debt ceiling. We may get through this. We may actually come to an agreement somewhere in the near future, but we will continue to watch this and see what happens. Let's grab one from the Daily Mail. Moving on, talking about the Durham report. As Adam Schiff leads Democrats trying to downplay Durham report as a waste, DailyMail.com breaks down more revelations that include his staffer threatening as researcher to probe the thin Trump collusion claims that began at a boozy bar meeting. We've got a couple articles on this, and we might skip a couple here. But this is from Jeff Earl. New revelations have continued to emerge since Monday's release of Special Counsel Durham's 300-page report, following his 4-year, $6.5 million investigation that concluded the FBI's failed to uphold their mission of strict fidelity to the law. Buried inside the dense document, which blasts the FBI for opening a full-blown investigation of the 2016 Trump campaign based on raw intelligence tips, are insights into how the Russia probe got started and links between people in Clinton's orbit and the stream of information on Trump's Russia contacts. It also points out what Durham calls an unfair discrepancy, why the Trump camp didn't get a defensive briefing on Russia's efforts to influence his campaign when the FBI did provide a briefing to Clinton when a foreign actor sought to influence hers. The report is now being denounced by some of the people who appear in its pages. House Intelligence Committee Adam Schiff on Tuesday was blasted as 4 years of a wasted effort, and worse than that, we have 4 years, I think, of undermining the department and a political prosecution. The California Democrat spoke even as passage in the report came to light, detailing how a university researcher who met with Schiff's own staff felt threatened by the request to provide analysis of a news article about the Trump Organization and Russia-owned Alpha Bank. It was a topic that the FBI would probe, whether there was a secret server for Trump Organization communications with Moscow, and that didn't pan out. The meeting took place in a secure room in the House Intelligence Committee, which Schiff would chair. Staff to Schiff and Jack Reed asked a pair of university researchers they had brought in to interview a news article about the alleged link. University I, Researcher 3, said that he responded by saying that it would be inappropriate for a public university to do that, suggested they contacted a government research entity. Reed staffer 2 then said, "We are now in charge." And one of the HPSCI staffers said that their boss, who was Schiff, would soon take over leadership of the Intel Committee. University I Researcher 3 took the comment as a mild threat, according to the report. At that point, the researcher then dragged the other researchers out of the meeting. University I Researcher 3 told investigators that he told University I Researcher 2, "Don't touch this with a 10-foot pole, stay away from this," according to the report. As for the Alpha Bank connection and the secret server, the FBI's investigation ultimately concluded that it was unable to substantiate any of the allegations of the white paper that Clinton lawyer Michael Sussman provided, according to the report. Sussman was found not guilty of lying to investigators in a D.C. court that was favorable to him. So just consider that for a half a second. You've got a government official telling you, as a researcher, to come up and find evidence of this. I mean, this goes above and beyond. Just find me 11,000 votes. You know they're there. Even if that was true, this goes above and beyond that. Find the information. and get it to me so we can make this happen and make sure that this person never takes office. Which is interesting. I'm going to go a little bit deeper into the university aid. I'm going to use the Daily Wire for this one here. Durham finds researcher felt threatened by Schiff staffer. From Daniel Shayton. A university researcher felt threatened when pressed by a staffer to Adam Schiff and a Democrat senator, seeking to help suss out alleged links between former President Trump and Russia, Special Counsel Durham revealed this week. According to Durham's report, which the Justice Department released on Monday, the researcher recalled traveling to Capitol Hill with a colleague in November 2018 to discuss a Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency cybersecurity program with Senate Armed Services Committee staffers. Afterwards, the pair agreed to talk with staffers of the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence. After a staffer for Jack Reed, then the ranking member of the Armed Services panel, mentioned their interest in a meeting. In a secure room, an HP CSI staffer presented a news article about Trump, Russia, and Alpha Bank. The researcher recounted the article appears to have been focused on the internet data that Hillary Clinton's presidential campaign used to fuel speculation about an unfounded secret back channel between the Trump organization and Russia's Alpha Bank. The HPSCI staffers said they wanted the university's help looking into the matter, but the researcher told Durham's team that he responded by saying it would be inappropriate for a public university, which in this case appears to be Georgia Tech, to do that, and suggested that they contact DARPA. That's when the Reed staffer said, "We are now in charge," and one of the HPSCI staffers said that their boss would soon take over the HPSCI leadership. Per the report, the researcher identified as University I Researcher 3 took the comment as a mild threat, Durham's report added. So, a little bit more breakdown in what happened with this. And yeah, I would take that as a threat too. These people seem desperate. Bringing no surprise to anybody's mind, the plant, Marjorie Taylor Greene, puts Merrick Garland in her sights with impeachment articles. Violation of justice. I think this is the second time she's filed articles of impeachment against Garland. Yes, actually, she previously introduced impeachment articles against Garland over the Mar-a-Lago raid. From Houston Keene. Georgia Republican Marjorie Taylor Greene is introducing articles of impeachment against A.G. Garland. Greene is slated to drop the impeachment articles against President Biden's top cop on Wednesday for facilitating the weaponization and politicization of the U.S. justice system against the American people. In his conduct as Attorney General of the United States in violation of his constitutional oath, faithfully to execute the office of Attorney General, one of the United States, and to the best of his ability preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States, Merrick Brian Garland continues to materially endanger the justice system of the United States and empower President Joseph R. Biden Jr. to persecute his political adversaries at will, the articles read. The article cites several controversies and scandals under Garland's tenure as Attorney General, including the FBI's targeting of parents concerned about their kids' education at the behest of Teachers Union letter, comparing them to domestic terrorism, as well as his refusal to prosecute leftist extremists that harassed and threatened the Supreme Court justices at their homes in the wake of Dobbs. I mean, this is all wonderful, and I'm glad that it's out there, but again, I don't think this is going anywhere. And I don't think McCarthy even brings it up for a vote, honestly. If you want my honest opinion about what could happen here. But she just seems to want to go back and impeach everybody, and again, my big concern here is that it just doesn't go anywhere. So, I found this before, and I think this ties a bit into Durham. But federal watchdogs issue scathing reports on U.S. Attorney for Massachusetts. This is the story of Rachel Rollins, from Lisa Kaczynski, Josh Gerstein, and Kyle Cheney. Mass top federal prosecutor leaked sensitive Justice Department information to a reporter as a part of an effort to help an ally in a political campaign, and then lied about it to investigators a Justice Department watchdog found. Which is surprising because, you know, we're supposed to be taking away from what happened with the Durham report that, hey, no, Democrats wouldn't do anything like this. They wouldn't tip the scales or put their fingers on the scale to help a friend. Stop looking over here into this. And here we find one of them is actually doing it. The finding was the most damaging in a devastating pair of reports issued by DOJ Inspector General Michael Horowitz and another federal watchdog agency against Rachel Rollins, who announced plans Tuesday to resign her position as U.S. Attorney for Mass, a post she has held since January of 2022. Her lawyer said in a statement on Tuesday that Rollins understands that her presence has become a distraction and that work of the office and the Department of Justice is far too important to be overshadowed by anything else. That seems to be the line that they always go with, too, when they go back and resign off of this. It's not, I got caught and I'm sorry. It's, we can't have this investigation going on in a department because it might be distracting to what's actually happening in our movement. The scathing reports from the Office of Special Counsel and Justice Inspector General, released just hours after Rollins announced plans to resign, condemned the U.S. Attorney's conduct in unusually harsh language, rarely leveled against her senior-level appointees. Ms. Rollins' conduct in leaking non-public DOJ information constitutes an extraordinary abuse of her authority and threatens to erode public confidence in the integrity of federal law enforcement actions. Special Counsel Henry Kerner wrote as he delivered a 105-page report to President Brandon. We found Rollins' conduct described throughout this report violated federal regulations, numerous DOJ policies, her ethics agreement, and applicable law, and fell far short of the standards of professionalism and judgment that the department should expect of any employee, much less a U.S. attorney, Horowitz concluded in his 161-page compendium on allegations against Rollins. Horowitz found that Rollins violated the federal false statement statute and indicated that he referred the matter to the DOJ for prosecutive decision on December 16, 2022, but 3 weeks later he noted the department informed the OIG that it declined prosecution. Imagine that. Rollins' departure, under a cloud of scandal, has repercussions that extend far beyond Mass. Biden and senior Senate Democrats used significant political capital to muscle Rollins' nomination through a divided Senate in December 2021. She was confirmed on a 51-50 vote that required Vice President Harris to break ties. Twice, by the way. Shortly after the reports were released on Wednesday, Judiciary Chair Dick Durbin said he welcomed Rollins' decision to step down. I'm deeply concerned by Ms. Rollins' misconduct as detailed in the Inspector General's and Special Counsel's reports, and support her immediate resignation, Durbin said in a statement. So, where's she gone? A little bit more on what it was that she did from CNN. U.S. Attorney in Mass leaked sensitive information to journalists to influence political campaign and lied under oath, federal reports say. From Hannah Rabinovitz and Devon Cole. Rachel Rollins, the U.S. Attorney for Mass, leaked sensitive Justice Department information to a journalist in an effort to influence a local election, lied to investigators, and improperly attended a fundraiser with Jill Biden, according to two critical reports released on Wednesday. I'm a little confused. I hope that some of this explains why the attending a fundraiser with Jill was an issue. That shouldn't be an issue. The other two? Oh yeah, absolutely. Let's see. The reports come one day after Rollins' attorney said she plans to resign at the end of the week. The Inspector General's report outlines the allegations and says Rollins lied during an interview about the information she gave the reporter. That false statement's allegation was referred to the DOJ, which has declined to bring charges. In a separate report, the Office of Special Counsel said that Rollins violated the Hatch Act that nobody knew about until 2017. The federal law that seeks to stop the federal government from affecting elections or going about its activities in a partisan manner attending the fundraiser, and by leaking the DOJ documents during a political campaign. That's why. That was a Hatch Act thing. Because she was acting in her official capacity to do so. I was confused about that, but now I see it. I still think going to the fundraiser is a stretch for Hatch Act. I see why they're using it. The violations are among the most egregious transgressions of the Act that the OSC has ever investigated, the Special Counsel report says. Rollins' attorney, Michael Bromwich, said in a statement to CNN on Wednesday that most of the allegations amount to minor process fouls. Yeah, if they did, she probably wouldn't have resigned, so she is out. Let's talk Covenant. I've got a little bit of a timeline for this one. Because we go from delivered to judge, to GOP demands the records, to the school trying to stop the records from coming out. And then, of course, the panic porn coming out as well. This is why you shouldn't even want to see this! In spite of the fact that if this thing had said, that had like 15 pages of Jew, 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 this would have been at the front page of CNN. The very next day. So let's read from the New York Post. Nashville school shooter's manifesto delivered to judge to decide on public release. From Ronnie Reyes. The red hat. I missed that at the beginning. I will credit Razorfist for pointing that out to me. A Tennessee judge is set to decide whether the full unredacted manifesto of Audrey Elizabeth Hale, stop dead naming, by the way, will be publicly released. The city's lawyers have submitted the manifesto along with a censored version to the Davidson County Jurist for a review, the local Fox 17 affiliate reported. The move comes after a slew of lawsuits calling on the city to release the manifesto in its entirety, involving the March 27th massacre that left 3 children and 3 staff members dead before Hale, 28, was shot and killed by the responding police. With a motive yet to be determined, many believe the writings could bring insight into why Hale, a former student at the Christian elementary school, committed the atrocity. The manifesto was previously under review by Nashville Police and the FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit. Tim Burchett, our Tennessee, who claimed the FBI was behind the delay in releasing the manifesto, said the writings could tell us a little bit about what's going on inside of Hale's head. Metro Nashville Council member Courtney Johnson said that she was told Hale's manifesto was a blueprint on total destruction and that one high-ranking Metro Nashville Police Department official informed her it keeps him up at night. Oh, come on. You can't put that in there and expect me now not to want to see it. Come on. So, that's how we started with this. This went to the judge. From the Tennessean, a division of USA Today. Tennessee House GOP requests school shooting records. Covenant wants a say in what's released. From Evan Mealins. As lawyers prepare for a hearing this week on releasing the records related to the Covenant school shooting, the school is seeking to intervene in the case, and a growing number of Tennessee House Republicans are calling for police to release the records. The Covenant School and Covenant Presbyterian Church filed motions to intervene in lawsuits, calling for the Metro Nashville Police Department to release several records relating to the mass shooting. The school wrote the requested records may include confidential information that could endanger its school students and faculty if released. Really? Have you seen it? The records sought may include or relate to sensitive information owned by the Covenant School, including but not limited to schematics of the school facilities and confidential information pertaining to the Covenant School employees and students. The school wrote in its expedited motion to intervene filed on Monday. The release of such information could cause security and safety issues. The requested documents include the shooter's writings as well as nearly all police communications about the writings, including emails, texts, and other communications. Tennessee Bureau of Investigation's Director David Rausch earlier characterized the shooter's writings more as ramblings rather than pointing to any clear motive. Covenant is hoping to argue its motion to intervene as a status conference set for Thursday afternoon in one of the lawsuits. The plaintiff, Clayton Brewer, is acting on behalf of the National Police Association, didn't object to the Covenant's request. Brewer wrote in response Monday that she does not oppose the motion to intervene for the limited purposes of allowing Covenant Church to claim the specific interest it alleges. So we have a little bit of lead in here to what happens in the next one, where yes, the Covenant themselves are trying to stop this. Now, what they presented does, I think, leave us with some... That person was using a fountain pen, by the way. Anyway, what they presented was a bit... like, it's on the nose. It's legitimate security concern, if that's the actual reasoning that they're trying to stop it. But honestly, I question, with as long as we waited for something like this, and the fact that the information was already publicly available enough for Hale to get his/her hands on it, the veracity of the claims. And yes, I do think that there's a public need to see something like this. There really is. I don't think we're actually going to. I think that they're going to keep finding excuse after excuse not to release it. But I think that we should see it. I really do. And I think a big part of what's going on there has to do with the fact that it's devastating to the trans narrative. And we have $1, by the way, from Dual Helix for the house fund. So when I go to the bank later on, I will get $1 out and put that in there. Thank you. That is over on Rumble side. Thank you so much for that. Thank you, Mr. Dual Helix, Mr. Scott. Meanwhile, we also just lost the Restream chat. I wonder what happened there. Hold on, let me see if I can just sign into it. Okay, we are back on the Restream chat. Reading from Newsweek here, Nashville school trying to stop the release of shooter Audrey Hale's manifesto, which we talked a bit about this. I want to cover this one here, though, from News Channel 9 over at ABC out of Nashville. Could releasing the Covenant Shooter's manifesto create a blueprint for copycats? From Caitlin Miller. I don't know if this is an op-ed or not. The headline reads as an op-ed, but we'll read into it a little bit. Parents from the Covenant School continue to grieve after the tragic mass shooting, and some of those parents do not want Metro Police to release the gunman's manifesto. Another group, National Police Association, is suing Metro government to get police to share Audrey Hale's writings. We've got a Fox Nashville poll from May 11th that says, do you think releasing the Covenant Shooter's manifesto will create a blueprint for copycats? Metro Police are the lead investigators on the Covenant School shooting, so that they're the agency that will determine when and what extent the manifesto is released. Sergeant Joseph Giasalone is a retired New York Police Department sergeant and says that you must be very careful when releasing something like this to the public. Unless, of course, it says, as I mentioned before, Jew, 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 Jew. Then we were going to put it out there for the entire world to see. Whether it goes through main channels or back channels. And by the way, if it goes through a back channel, we'll pretend to go back and try to take it down. You always worry if someone is either going to take revenge or use it as a copycat kind of thing, so we don't want it turning into a how-to manual, Sergeant G.S. Alone explained. Sergeant G.S. Alone says going through all the calls, texts, and interviewing people involved takes a lot of time. Metro Police say this is one of the reasons the department has not released the manifesto, since this is an open investigation and they're using recent lawsuits as another reason. Metro also says some of the parents from Covenant oppose the release of the manifesto. Can we agree that we want our kids to feel safer in school? Can we agree that we want to keep guns out of dangerous people's hands? Becky Hansen says. The problem is, of course, who decides who is dangerous. Hansen emphasizes she wants to focus on gun reform, because of course she does. I don't think releasing manifestos like this inspires copycats. There is typically a feeling of self-preservation that I think overrides a lot of the more evil thoughts that go through this. I think it takes a special kind of psychopath who's already committed to doing something like this to commit an atrocity like this. And if a person is looking for the manifesto as a how-to guide, that person has already done a bunch of research and found another way in. And again, like as it was pointed out in the Discord server that I'm in, I think a lot of this comes down to the fact that this is devastating to the trans agenda. Another one from Newsweek. Moving on, talking a little bit about DeSantis. I've got one on the bubble at the very end that might wind up in things that I hate. But you might get to hear me say choice words to Pinger and Random House either tonight or tomorrow. Coming from Newsweek again. Latino truckers to boycott Florida. Video show, we will not be going. I'm actually going to refresh this to see if we have those videos that they speak of. No, they just talk about Ron DeSantis doing the Immigration Act. Do we have an author? Yes, Alex Phillips wrote this one. Latino truckers have vowed to boycott the state of Florida after Governor DeSantis signed a new law that targets undocumented immigrants, calling for solidarity with our Latin American brother. See, the problem that I have with this, number one, is the fact that it always seems to be the woke Democrats who accidentally slip the racism into this. Anybody who is Latin American is automatically assumed to be an illegal immigrant. Whereas, and again, this has been pointing out, that a lot more Latinos are turning conservative because they're getting sick of being compared to the illegal immigrant. You know, we're third and fourth generation at this point, and a lot of these people are business leaders, business owners. They were born here, and yet they keep being compared to the criminals who happen to have the same skin tone that they do. Videos posted on social media in recent days suggest that some will be targeting June 1st, a month before the new law goes into effect, in defense of those who will face new restrictions under the legislation, while others call for collective action, so they appreciate the immigrant. The calls for a boycott come in response to a passage of SB 1718 by the state legislature, which among its clauses would require employers to use monitoring software to check that their workers are legally allowed to do so and require hospitals to collect information on undocumented patients. That should be the norm. You shouldn't be vowing to stay undocumented if you want to be in this country. And instead, you should be looking to get these documents on file so you can start the process of being legal. Interesting story about that, Mr. Scott. We're going to talk about that at the end of the show a bit. If you bully, ridicule, and ostracize someone, that person always becomes an extremist by definition. I don't say that they always do, but the assumption is there. Absolutely. While the new law, which DeSantis signed on Wednesday, has received plaudits from some Republicans, others have welcomed a potential boycott in a bid to show how the U.S. relies on migrant workers. New York Democratic Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Chavez said policymakers across the aisle will take our immigrant communities for granted, okay, papi? I don't know about you guys, but my truck will not be going to Florida at all, one driver said in a Saturday TikTok video that's attracted nearly 82,000 likes. If we all came together as one community for Rogel Aguilera when he was facing injustice, I'm pretty sure we can all come together as a Latino community and boycott Florida as a whole. Rogel Aguilera Medeiros was a young truck driver in Colorado who in 2021 was sentenced to 110 years in prison for his role in a collision that resulted in 4 deaths. That sentence prompted controversy and a petition of more than 5.1 million signatures, calling for it to be lowered. The sentence was later reduced by Governor Polis to 10 years. Well, in reality, 110 years was also extremely excessive. And the prosecutor who pushed for that should be ashamed of himself, no matter what the legal status of that immigrant was. What they're doing to our brothers and sisters out there is not fair, even in the truck driving industry where millions the trucker added in the video. In a Thursday video that's been liked nearly 18,000 times, another trucker can be seen saluting, while a voice says in Spanish that his truck will not be picking up or dropping off cargo in Florida in solidarity. Okay, that's all well and good, and that's really well and good for you. You should be able to pick and choose your loads and where you go. It shouldn't be up to your company to do so. Interesting side note about a friend of mine. Actually, I want to go check my Discord just to make sure. No, that wasn't a response that I got from him. I had mentioned something on Discord to one of my friends who used to be a trucker, and I'm not going to mention him by name because I didn't get the permission to, but he went in the completely other direction, and it wasn't necessarily for political purposes, although that plays into it a bit. More of excessive law and excessive crackdown on that. But he was just one person. And that always opened up the slot for somebody else to go back in. But I have a friend who I think he spent like 4 years in a truck, just driving back and forth across the country. He was a company driver. He didn't own or operate. But he was a company driver. And he had said straight out, it says, hey man, I don't want to go to California. Every time I go there, I get popped for some sort of violation and I get stuck at the scale for hours and hours on end, and I don't want to go back to there. And that is, again, not to mention the fact that the political climate that makes it harder for truckers and harder for truckers as they go. But realistically, and there are a lot of drivers out there who, for political purposes, like boycotting a state is nothing new, especially in the commercial vehicle industry. A lot of people don't want to go there because they don't want to put the ELD in their vehicles. They don't want to go there because they don't want to pass the emissions that California requires. Remember, California requires that all commercial vehicles that enter their state and anything that gets registered in their state, anything that's older than 2010 emissions, cannot be registered in California. And they will stop you and they will check your emissions here at the border. I've not actually witnessed this happen, This isn't like the DeSantis authoritarian crackdown on COVID, where I actually witnessed the checkpoint they were taking it down at the time, but I actually witnessed the checkpoint where they were stopping people on 95 coming in to give them a nose swab before they came into Florida. I am so glad they were pulling that down when we came screaming through. And that's a reminder that DeSantis is not your friend, by the way. But we're not going to go down that route right now. So yeah, all these people they don't ever want to go to Florida. They don't want to pick up or drop cargo in Florida. That's well and good. But everybody else wants to go there. And I'm sure that's not going to be all Latinos, because again, there are a lot of people out there that don't want to be associated with the illegal immigrant. They're sick of that association. So yeah, they'll pick up and drop off because the money's good. And the weather is typically good. Like, you don't typically have to worry about snow, ice, or crap like that. But trust me, they tried to throw an image of a Walmart right before a hurricane where people had started buying out supplies en masse. Panic buying supplies en masse right before a hurricane. They started circulating it around saying, see, it's already happened and there's no food on the shelves in Florida. Which was stupid because Community Notes can fact check almost anything instantly at this point on Twitter. But no, there will still be food on the shelves in Florida. Trucks will still go there. Maybe too many of them. Because there are a number of people out there who still want to drive and still want to drive in good conditions. And hey, if enough of you boycott, you'll raise the prices of loads coming to and from Florida, by the way. Did you think about that? Alright, what else do we have? Florida news. Florida man. Another DeSantis bill. Red meat to the authoritarian right base. This is the kind of stuff, the reason I can't stand this guy. Now, mind you, this is all targeting minors. But a lot of this he's doing in something that he normally wouldn't have cared about. To go back and make the point to the evangelical voter of, hey, see, I'm going to use the authoritarianism for good. DeSantis signs bills targeting drag shows, pronouns, bathroom use, and transgender procedures. From the Associated Press and NBC 6. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis chose a Christian school as a setting for signing bills Wednesday that ban gender surgical procedures for minors, restricts pronoun use in schools, and forces people to use the bathroom corresponding with their sex in some cases. And see, that's the thing. If the government is telling you what bathroom you can use, now if it's a kids thing, that's a little bit different because obviously no dirty old men in the bathroom with kids, but just the fact that this got publicized to this point, where this has been going on, albeit with a relatively small portion of the population, for decades before this. Again, I point to the beginning of the Dennis Leary roast in, was that 04 when that came out? I want to watch that again. I don't have a DVD player on my computer, so we can't watch it together in the Discord. But in the opening credits of the Dennis Leary roast, when the transsexual person came in, while Leary was standing at the urinal taking a leak in a dress, very, very feminine presenting, transsexual, and this was in 04, by the way, and whips it out and pees in the urinal next to him. And it wasn't a problem until Barack Obama started making a huge deal out of it. DeSantis has made the anti-LGBTQIRAMIGXTBYOUAERA, sometimes Y, legislation part of his agenda as he builds towards a Republican presidential campaign. He signed bills in front of a cheering crowd at Cambridge Christian School in Tampa. The ceremony had a campaign-like feel as opposed to when he signed measures on abortion and gun rights in private. Yeah, and again, there's a point to the reason. There's a reason he's doing it this way. Because I do believe he's going to run. He's going to run, and he's going to run as, I'm the evangelical Christian. I'm not the populist. I'm not the Trump type. Vote for me. It's kind of sad that we have to have some of these discussions, DeSantis told the crowd as he stood behind a lectern with a sign that said, "Let kids be kids." He said the new laws will prevent mutilation of minors, protect children from sexually explicit entertainment, and keep pronouns from being forced on students. We never did this through all of human history until 2 weeks ago? Now this is something. We're having third graders declare pronouns. We're not doing the pronoun Olympics in Florida, DeSantis said to applause. Republican Rep. Randy Fine, who sponsored the ban on the procedures for minors, invoked his religion to defend the state's actions. This is going to be an interesting campaign, by the way. It is. A lot of this stuff does not fall outside the purview of the 10th Amendment, which means this is a states' rights issue. And if the people who elect the representatives in Florida want to see these laws in Florida, that's fine. That's great by them. But a lot of this is going to be used as cannon fodder. As cannon ammunition for a broad stretch against the DeSantis campaign to say, see what he's doing in Florida? He wants to do that everywhere, even in California. We'll see what happens with this. I'm getting some popcorn either way, and I won't vote for DeSantis, but I'm still getting some popcorn either way. Another one, which NBC is using to try to astroturf, a little bit of DeSantis fandom here, even though this is actually not just a DeSantis thing. And also by request, not by offering. From NBC News, Ron DeSantis is sending Florida law enforcement and National Guard members to the Texas border. From Matt Dixon, DeSantis announced Tuesday that he's sending more than 1,100 state law enforcement agents and National Guard members to Texas border with Mexico. The number is a tenfold increase compared to a similar move in 2021 and comes just weeks ahead of his expected presidential launch. DeSantis has signaled for weeks he was preparing an immigration-focused announcement as he re-energized his war of words over the issue with President Brandon, whose admin recently followed the lapse of Title 42, a pandemic-era policy that made it easier to expel migrants. DeSantis will be sending 800 members of the Florida National Guard, 200 agents in teams of 40 from the State Department of Law Enforcement, 101 state highway patrol officers, which means, hey, if you want to speed in Florida, now's the time. 20 agents from the State Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission and the Department of Energy Management, 5 fixed-wing aircraft, 17 unmanned drones, 10 waterborne vessels. DeSantis' Office of the Personnel will be at the border for 30 days with possible extensions. The announcement comes just weeks before the June start of hurricane season, which makes me a little bit nervous, especially in a place that is so hurricane prone. But, it's not just DeSantis either, which is why I included the Axios article after this. Florida and Idaho answer Abbott's call to send officers to Texas border. So, this is not DeSantis jumping up to do this. Well, he is doing this for political points, obviously. But it's not just him volunteering and saying, hey, I'm going to go do this like I did with sending your immigrants to Martha's Vineyard, which I do think fell outside of his purview at one point. But this is actually something that Abbott has requested, and Idaho is getting in on it as well. From Serene Habeshian and Rebecca Falconer. The Republican governors of Florida and Idaho are sending law enforcement officers and other assistants to the U.S.-Mexico border, Greg Abbott announced on Tuesday. DeSantis said he'll send resources in over 1,100 to Texas, including 800 state National Guard members, 200 law enforcement officers, and teams of 40 and 5 aircraft. Meanwhile, Brad Little said he will send state police to support Texas officials at the southern border. With the help of states like Idaho, we continue to fill dangerous gaps created by Biden's open border policies, Abbott said. Idaho officials had yet to announce how many officers they will deploy. The governor's office did not immediately respond to Axios' request for comment. See, the issue with that, Helix says this is a business opportunity for these drone pilots. They should form a business to go patrol the border with drones. There is a slight issue with that based on the fact that you need to be deputized to patrol the border, which means in typical cases a federal law enforcement agency actually has to come back and grant you the authority to use your drone pilot, your drone to patrol the border. And of course that's mostly going to be military drones that do so. I believe the border is a no-fly zone for civilian drones. Don't quote me on that, I don't know for sure. But I believe the border is a no-fly zone for that type of drone. But with that being said, with us being in the instance where that's out there, even the ones who are coming out with the military drones, they have to be deputized to do so. It's a good idea, and I would like to see more private policing, especially on something like the border. Because I'd like to see more privatization in everything. Because I'm a big fan of privatization. There are laws that, while we have the authoritarian government that we have, do need to be followed in the unfortunate point that it is. Yes, I would rather see much, much more be privatized. Idaho officials have yet to announce how many officers they will deploy. The governor's office did not immediately respond to Axios' request for commentary. So, that is where we're at for that. Let's talk Hunter. Got just a few more here. I think these last two here, NBC5 and NBC6, will land on things that I hate tomorrow, by the way. Let's talk Hunter, briefly. IRS removes investigative team from Hunter Biden probe and move. Whistleblower calls clearly retaliatory. From Stephen Nelson. The IRS on Monday removed the entire investigative team from its long-running tax fraud probe of first son Hunter Biden in an alleged retaliation against the whistleblower who recently contacted Congress to allege a cover-up in the case. The Post has learned. The purge allegedly was done on the orders of the DOJ. The whistleblower's attorneys informed congressional leaders in a letter. Today, the IRS Criminal Supervisory Special Agent we represent was informed that he and his entire investigative team are being removed from the ongoing and sensitive investigation of the high-profile controversial subject about which our client sought to make whistleblower disclosures to Congress. He was informed the change was at the request of the Department of Justice, Mark Little and Tristan Levitt wrote. The whistleblower, who supervised the Hunter probe since early 2020, hasn't publicly identified the first son as the subject of the case that he says is being brushed under the rug, but congressional sources confirmed it. On April 27, 2023, IRS Commissioner Daniel Werfel appeared before the House Committee on Ways and Means. He testified, "I can say without any hesitation there will be no retaliation for anyone making an allegation or call to a whistleblower hotline. However, this move is clearly retaliatory and may also constitute obstruction of congressional inquiry," the lawyers went on. That's interesting. Now, if they find out who the whistleblower is, which I don't necessarily know that they did this because they want to punish everybody for the fact that this is out there, but as far as we know, as far as we as civilians know, we don't know who this whistleblower is. Whether the DOJ does or not is unclear. Congress obviously does, but whether the DOJ does or not is unclear. So, if they're trying to keep something from getting out to the public, which it does kind of seem like it does if they're going to fire the entire team because of one whistleblower, it means that they don't know who it was, and they're eliminating all the leaks. Hey, if you're all gone, then we guarantee that we got the whistleblower in the sweep. That is not a good look for the DOJ or the Biden admin. That's not a good look for Garland. And maybe Marjorie Taylor Greene's articles are warranted at this point. Not that they'll ever see the light of day anyway, but maybe with something like this, they're warranted. I got a couple on the Texas massacre, and I think we're going to call it a day after this. Police and witnesses give contradictory accounts of response to Texas mall shooting. From Emily May Sachor. Authorities have publicly denied the eyewitness account of a man who had earlier said he recalled the Allen, Texas mall shooting scene immediately following the massacre in great detail, claiming he administered aid to victims before police officers arrived. The gunman opened fire at the outlet mall outside Dallas, killing 8 people and wounding 7 others on May 6th. Stephen Spainhour, a former U.S. Army officer, said he drove to Allen Premium Outlets after his son, sheltering in place inside the H&M where he worked, called to tell him he had heard gunfire on the property. Need something to drink. Excuse me. Spainhour spoke to a number of media outlets, including CBS, about the aftermath of the shooting. He claimed that those interviews that he arrived in the parking lot of the outlet mall before the first responders, and said he administered aid and performed CPR on people who had been shot. Spainhour recounted the carnage he saw, including a young girl who had no face and a young boy covered head to toe in blood, who, according to Spainhour, was hiding beneath the body of his deceased mother. The Allen Police Department on Friday issued a statement contradicting Spainhour's account, saying detectives had determined that Mr. Spainhour is not a credible incident witness. Allen Police wants to inform the public of discrepancies with the statement made by a witness to several media outlets following the shooting at Allen Premium Outlets. Mr. Stephen Spainhour McKinney gave multiple accounts of his actions. The statement read, "Inconsistencies between these public accounts and investigative facts led Allen Police Department to conduct a follow-up interview. During this interview, detectives determined that Mr. Spainhour is not a credible incident witness." It sounds to me like this was somebody, like Sam Janney of Politibuddy fame over on Twitter, who is a writer for Twitchy. I actually think she's the editor-in-chief at Twitchy. But she had put out the article, and hers suggesting that what Spainhour did was malice to try to either mar the investigation or to form a narrative. I don't think that was it. I think this was somebody who saw an opportunity, who did probably get there a little bit before the first responders, because he had the inside knowledge because his son was there, and was likely actually somewhere close, and did nothing, but was able to come back out and get his 15 minutes of fame and say, "Hey, look at me, I'm a hero." I don't think this was malice, like trying to change something about the investigation. From the sounds of what CBS News, and take this with a grain of salt because it's CBS News, but from the sounds of it, this seems more like somebody trying to get some stolen valor. Honestly. Which is weird because this is already an army dude. What'd they say he was? A ranger? Oh, they didn't say he was a ranger, they just said he was an officer. Which realistically, like, dude, you gotta be held to a higher standard at that point. Let's be realistic about that. But he is insisting that he did, from the New York Post. Massacre witness Steve Spainhour insists he helped victims through though the police say he's not credible. From Ronnie Reyes. And actually, we're not going to go too far into this one, but I will point out the same thing that I say all the time. The only person that really knows what happened before the first responders got there, no matter what the detectives determined, what the autopsies determined, what the other eyewitnesses determined, the only people that actually know what was happening before the first responders got there were Steven Spainhour and the victims on the ground. Everything else we do from the outside is going to be speculation because none of us were there. So do take some of this with a grain of salt. Believe, but question. If you do choose to believe what Spainhour says. But always keep the mind open to question. Because again, just like with Kavanaugh, just like with Biden and Tara Reade, and a host of other things where it's believe all women except when it's convenient or inconvenient to do so, the only people who knew were there, the only people who know what's happened in the Bergdorf dressing room are Donald John Trump and Elizabeth Jean Carroll. The only people who know what happened in that congressional hallway are Joseph Robinette Biden Jr. and Tara Reade. The only person who knows what happened in that bedroom, for sure, are Brett Kavanaugh and Christine Blasey Ford. So that's where we are at with that. And with that, we're going to close out the show. And I want to address something based on something that Dual Helix said over on Rumble before we head out of here for the day. And it's a bit of something that I'm kind of thankful for because it didn't actually turn out the way that Dual Helix said. Let's get the scene changed up here. Let's have a look at this. So, a lot of you know, a lot of you have been here since the beginning. Not all of you, but a lot of you have been here since the very beginning. Since the very first video that I put out in February of 2018. Very shortly after my girlfriend broke up with me. Much different scene than what we were at even for the last 4 years. Very, very much different scene than what we're at now. Different location. I was basically living in the loft of our 3-bedroom apartment. But I want to just walk back on to what I said because of the topic of my first video. And what Mr. Scott said over here reminded me of that. Now, the exact quote from Mr. Scott says, "If you bully, ridicule, and ostracize someone, that person always becomes an extremist, by definition." I'm going to open up a little bit about myself here, but also of probably one of my favorite people in the world, who was taken from us too soon due to complications from a degenerative muscle disease that he's had since birth. 25 years on this planet is just too short for somebody who was actually probably one of the most fun people to be around that you could ever imagine. My little brother, the chicken nugget. When I started my channel, and you can go back, like, you're going to do a lot of scrolling, trust me, because there are well over 1,000 videos on this channel at this point. But you can go back and find the original videos. Me talking about what had happened, and this was shortly after Parkland, because that was what the first few videos on my channel revolved around, were the Parkland shooting. And yes, my best friend was bullied, ridiculed, and ostracized from the very beginning, and he didn't get pushed to that edge. Now, mind you, the upperclassmen in our school tried to convince the world that he was pushed to that edge. I actually stood in front of our school and blamed the entire student body for what had happened that day, even though it didn't actually happen. We found out later that it was completely made up and bullshit. It was shortly after there was an altercation with a teacher, after years of bullying, by the way, where he kind of snapped and yelled at the teacher, and then some upperclassmen, and I'm again not going to name names, had told the news that they had found him in a hall later on and said that he wanted to come back and put a cap in everybody, which is something that nobody in the neighborhood I grew up in the small town I grew up in, actually said. We were not inner city by any stretch of the imagination. And I know he didn't say that because he would not have had a home to go to if he had actually said that. I know his parents very well. I call his parents my own parents, even though I do have a set of my actual biological parents that I love dearly as well. I know he didn't say that. Because he would have got his ass beat at home for making such a ridiculous allegation. And also opening them back up to investigation as well. You just don't do that in small town America. But regardless, Nugget was not an extremist, and as much flack as I got, bullying, ostracization, ridicule, for not being one of the big families growing up, I also didn't turn out to an extremist, although there are some people on Twitter who would argue with that assessment, who would tell you that I'm an extremist. So it doesn't always turn out that way, and there are people out there who it does turn out that way for, and that's very unfortunate. I feel very fortunate over the fact that I was in a situation where that didn't happen, in a small town where something like that couldn't happen. There are outlets. I do really think that some of this is being pushed by a higher power, an invisible hand, to try to come to a political outcome. Some of it's medication, and I mean, there are allegations. I can't prove anything because I wasn't in that Discord server, but there are allegations that both the Uvalde shooter and the Buffalo shooter were in the same Discord server with a, quote, retired FBI agent. Make of that what you will. And I don't think this happens organically, honestly. Like DeSantis says, let kids be kids. Kids take criticism from each other. That's how they learn coping mechanisms and the ability to function in the adult world. Sometimes it is well more extreme than it needs to be. I've witnessed it. I've experienced it. But what I'm thankful for is that the vast majority of people who get this, maybe they run to gaming or something else like that, but the statistical possibility of an extremist, especially an extremist like Nicholas Cruz, is statistically extremely, insanely low. And that's my 2 cents on ridicule and ostracization. Results, maybe not typical, maybe they are typical. But I'm glad that it didn't happen in my small town life. And as much as it was painful, as much as, 14-year-old J. Edgar would want to come back and kick my ass for saying this, I'm kind of glad it happened. I'm kind of glad, too, that I learned that nobody's going to come to your rescue. You've either got to learn to cope, deal with it, or fight back. Make your life better. Because as much as the system's going to try to push you back down, nobody's coming to your rescue. I needed to learn that at a young age. I really did. And it did help shape where we're at right now. Where I always say, don't put your faith in a government or a politician to do it for you. Can another dozen jars hoe in another row? and load another box of ammo. Rescue yourself. Make your life better and improve yourself. And that is the thing that I'm thankful for. Alright, let's head out of here. What are we doing on the Twitch side? Is anybody watching over on the Twitch side? I want to raid anyway. I don't know. Mogwai, are you there? For whatever reason, Mogwai doesn't show up in my Twitch viewership. I got paid out from Twitch, by the way. I've got to make sure that... I think I said direct deposit. So I'll have to check my bank account after the next couple days and see if it went in there. I think it's supposed to go to my savings account. I think. Don't quote me on that. But if they mailed a paper check, I'm screwed because I didn't even see it coming. So I didn't get the notice, and next thing I know, it's going to my old address. Not a huge amount, $50 though. Which means enough people are coming in and cheering and sharing this out that we're actually getting the commercial set in. So thank you for that, by the way. Alright, let's find out who we're raiding and we'll head out of here for the day. Silentcaster. We'll go raid Silentcaster. Our buddy over there. We'll go. We'll talk to him. If you're on the Twitch side, twitch.tv/JEdgar101. Join us now, and we'll go over there and check out a very, very great podcaster. Somebody who I hope to work with in the near future. And let's throw the outro music up and let's head out of here. So, with that, we are done. We are out of here. Thank you, everybody who came by and chatted in the live chat. It's been a great time. Very enjoyable night. We got a lot done, and we've got things I like and things I hate on deck for tomorrow, which that'll be a fun one. I've got a nice big variety sitting over there. We've got a nice big list again, definitely. But with that, we will see you here tomorrow, 6 p.m. Central Time, for more news, more headlines, more contemporary. Hope to see you guys here. Hope to get some good conversation going. And we will see you then. I don't know what we're going to be covering here. We'll probably be doing some more debt ceiling stuff. We'll probably be doing some more Durham stuff because that's going to be up in the news here. And, well, we'll see what else happens in the next 22 hours. So, be good, take care, get something to eat, go hug your family, and have a good night, everybody. And we will see you here next time on Contemporary. And until then, I am Jay Edgar. And this is Contemporary. Take care.